I have a great group with me to break all of this down. We have MS Now senior Capitol Hill reporter Ali Vitale. She steps outside of the Justice Committee's hearing room. And then here with me at the table is MS Now Power Panel senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig, Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Dilanian, senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, and we have legal analyst and former principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Mary McCord. It is so great to have all of you here with me. I'm going to start with you, Mary. I want just your initial reactions to what we've heard here from Todd Blanche. And if there is a single thing he said at any moment that will reassure people who have been deeply concerned about that point I mentioned just a moment ago, that this is the president's former personal attorney. In fact, at one point, he even stumbled and said, "I'm his lawyer," and then quickly said, was his lawyer. That caught a lot of attention. But for anyone who is worried about that exact dynamic, has he said anything that will make them feel even a little bit better about that?
I mean, he has said words. He has said words like, I would never, of course, be asked to do anything illegal, but if I was, I would refuse to do it or I would resign. But he said those kind of words back when he was originally confirmed. And what we have seen in the year and a half is that he has time after time after time done exactly what the president wanted him to do. And I think another thing here that's interesting is that he's being very careful to try to deflect attention away from the things that I think, many people want to know about, the political prosecutions, these type of things, by continuing to come back to this idea that he and the Department of Justice are responsible for, combating violent crime, and murder rates are down. The vast majority of murders are prosecuted by state and local prosecutors, right? The rates of violent crime were coming down well before the Trump administration ever came into office. It does not, he used the term secure safety over and over again. We're here to secure safety. Political prosecutions don't secure safety. Dismissing the seditious conspiracy convictions of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers don't secure safety. Upping federal immigration enforcement doesn't secure safety. We've had now how many people killed by federal immigration enforcement agents, including
2 in just about the past week.
Yes, and also and U.S. citizens, right? Going after election fraud from 2020 does not secure safety. So his verbiage is very different than reality of the way he's approaching his position at the Department of Justice.
Lisa, I want to talk to you about the Epstein-related questions here. I was asking you before we even stepped out here into the studio about these claims that he was making, basically as he was being questioned about why he has not yet actually sat and met with survivors. And he was essentially, it seemed to me, trying to say, well, because I'm not able to, as Attorney General, actually meet with them. They have attorneys, that would make it inappropriate. Is there any truth to that at all? I mean, my understanding is if they were, say, defendants in a case that he was prosecuting, correct, that might be a problem. But these are survivors.
They are survivors. So let's go back, first of all, Antonia, to his answer, because I don't think it was a clear answer. Todd Blanche has alternately said that he has met with representatives of the Epstein survivors, for example, their lawyers or other advocates, and other moments he appeared to say that he has met with survivors. But of course, some of those survivors have written to the committee. Senator Dick Durbin entered their letters into the record this morning, meaning they'll be a part of the record of the hearing. And Sky Roberts and his wife Amanda, they are the brother and sister-in-law of Virginia Giuffre, a very famous survivor, has said, "We are unaware of any survivor who has met with Todd Blanche." Now, let's go back to your original question about ethically, can he meet with survivors? He can, unless they are a defendant or they are represented by counsel and they don't bring their lawyers. And that's because there are ethical rules, which Mary and I know well, that say if you are a lawyer, you cannot meet with a party you understand to be represented by a lawyer without their lawyer present. But of course, that wouldn't stop Todd Blanche from meeting with any of the Epstein survivors who want to bring their lawyers with. And my understanding is that he has been repeatedly provided with their contact information. In fact, earlier this week, Senators Murray and Van Hollen reminded him, we asked you to make that commitment at an appropriations hearing earlier this year. You said you would receive the contact information. We've passed it along to your office, and to the best of our knowledge, you've never taken that meeting, much less contacted that person. So there is some daylight between what Todd Blanche is saying happened and what the survivors' account of the outreach from his office has been.
Yeah, daylight might be a very diplomatic way of putting it. Ken, why do you think he couldn't just answer Senator Durbin's question directly? It was a yes or no question. Are you going to meet with them in the next 30 days?
Look, I mean, Todd Blanche doesn't want to talk about the Epstein files. It's a bad story for him. I just think stepping back, I don't think if the goal of the Democrats here is to defeat the confirmation of Todd Blanche, I'm not sure they're succeeding. I don't think the tone and tenor of this hearing has matched the gravity of the rule of law crisis that we are living with at the Department of Justice that Carol and I are trying to cover every day. The questioning has been uneven, to say the least. You know, Sheldon Whitehouse was powerful. He was pretty aggressive. He asked some very tough questions. Other Democrats did not do that. There's no coordination here. Look, the January 6th committee showed the world how you can have effective congressional hearings. They played video. They had people behind the scenes orchestrating it. You can't do that in a hearing like this, but you could do a junior version of it, and it just hasn't happened. And Todd Blanche has been able to prevent sort of an Orwellian version of reality. That last exchange we saw with Senator Schmidt was just amazing, where he's essentially accusing without evidence the Biden Justice Department of being weaponized, when actually this Justice Department has been weaponized. They're the ones that are firing people because they worked on cases that Donald Trump didn't like. They're the ones that are prosecuting the president's political enemies, and he really hasn't been held to account for those things.
I want to bring in Allie, who's there for us on Capitol Hill and steps away from all of this. Allie, I know that you have your reporting and your own reflections here, but I hope you were able to hear what Ken was just saying there. And I'm wondering from your perspective why Democrats weren't more prepared to take advantage of this moment.
I always listen when Ken Dilanian speaks. Frankly, that's true for anyone on that panel, and you, of course, Antonia. But I think for me, Ken makes a good point that there should be more coordination, right? But the January 6th Select Committee is almost spoiling for people who watch other congressional hearings, because that was a rare instance of everyone agreeing that they were marching in lockstep to the same end goal, and that was to tell a clear narrative story about January 6th. That is not the way, unfortunately, other committee hearings work, and this is evidence of that, right? Each senator comes in with their own line of questions, their own things that they think are interesting. It means that they're retreading some of the same points. Some of them are better or worse at this than others. I think, to me, the people I was watching the most closely ended up being the most instructive, if not the most clear sign that this is probably a confirmation that is going to go through. And I'll put an asterisk there for a moment. I was looking closely at both Senator Kennedy of Louisiana, who ended up asking some pretty softball questions, came out of that hearing room and told me not that he's a yes, but basically that he's a yes. And then I was also watching Senator Cornyn, who said that he had concerns going in, asked some questions about the anti-weaponization fund, and we'll see where he ends up. The last person that we need to watch now is Senator Tillis, because he has not yet asked his questions, but he is one of those who has floated the potential of voting no on Blanche, though he does seem predisposed to be a yes. And the reason that we're looking for one no is because that is what it would take to stall this nomination at the committee level, and it does not seem like we are at that point.
Allie, can I ask you a quick follow-up on that? When you say that you think more than likely that Blanche is going to be able to make it through here, he's going to be able to get the last couple votes. Walk me through why, particularly on Cornyn and Tillis, just given their histories recently with the president, and the fact that at least for some of the folks who are in this sort of like YOLO caucus, they don't owe anything to the president anymore, why they wouldn't, use that to their advantage in this moment.
The way I think about the YOLO members is that they are YOLO in that the president can't powerfully twist their arm anymore, but they are still Republicans and they are still conservatives. And so to the extent that their opinions diverge from the White House, if it's still in line with the conservative orthodoxy that they have, they will vote for these people. And I think going into this hearing, I was looking at the people who talk the talk but have not necessarily voted the vote or walked the walk yet. And this might be another instance of that. We don't know until they vote. But I think if we're reading tea leaves here, I'm just not sure about what we're going to end up seeing based on the ways that these questions have gone so far. And again, Tillis has not yet asked his questions.
All right. I'm going to bring in my friend Ari Melber, who's here now at the table with us. Ari, I want your reflections on what we've seen from Blanche. At one point, moments ago, Ken just described this as a kind of Orwellian hearing. Do you see it that way?
Well, you have this, what in courts they call the presumption of regularity, right? You have this normal vibe for a terribly abnormal rule of law crisis. I think Todd Blanche is one of the most immediately discredited people to ever be in this role. He's acting, as he has testified, and he's been overseeing revenge indictments, a plot to give money to criminals, which he now says is over, but he can't really speak to how the underlying documentation works, which was, of course, one of the lines of questioning today. And there was a lot of talk about police, and he seemed to try to blur or fuzz the fact that he is part of an administration. He didn't issue the pardons, but he's part of the administration that has been the most pro-violence, anti-police administration in modern American history. You took people convicted of sedition, who we all saw battering and attacking police with weaponry, and you pardoned them, and then you said you might give them money. If that's not an Orwellian upside-down idea of law enforcement, I don't know what is. And yet, putting on my hat as an objective legal reporter, he had a bad hand, and he played it effectively. He played this bad hand so effectively that someone watching casually might think this was like any other confirmation hearing. And given the state of the rule of law in this country, the judicial rulings repeatedly from independent and sometimes Republican appointees against this administration, the Supreme Court knocking down a ballot midterm plot in the last couple weeks, an ethics crisis at the Supreme Court, a corruption crisis inside the government that in any other normal DOJ, Republican or not, there would be a very active look at whether there's self-dealing, corruption, sale of government activity, later indictments to come, special counsels needed. Any normal administration, you'd appoint a special counsel to deal with all this crypto corruption. So these are things that I think it is true, what I believe Ken and others said, which is the Democratic side that you might expect an opposition to be tougher was at best sporadic on that rolling crisis.